Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to AMC Mailbag, the all-mailbag show here on AMC Movie News, where all we do is take your mailbag questions. My name is John Candy. I am the editor-in-chief of AMC Movie News, and I'm so glad you decided to join us this weekend. And I'm also very excited that joining me at the table today is our very own Miss Ashley Mova. Ashley, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, John. What's up, party people? I'm excited to do this.
As I said, this is all about your questions. Listen, if you've got a comment or a question you'd like to see on AMC Mailbag or AMC Movie Talk, email us at amcmovietalk@gmail.com. Send in your question 24/7, and maybe you will see your question on one of our shows. With all that being said, let's head into the first question.
Alrighty, Herb Wade writes, "Hey, my AMC friends, I really love the show. My question is, do you ever have AMC Movie Talk fans run up to you guys and ask lots of questions regarding movies?"
It is one of the most surreal things, especially over the past year and a half, as AMC Movie Talk and AMC Movie News has grown, walking around town and having people run up and recognize us. I mean, it happens here at the AMC Burbank 16 a lot. Which you expect, because this is our home office. People come to the movies here.
Right.
People come to the movies, watch AMC Movie Talk. So like me and Dennis or, Schnepp or Christian or Amy Rose will be in there, and inevitably a bunch of people will see us and will come up and talk to us. What's really weird now is that usually at red carpets, when I go to a red carpet premiere, Anne usually comes with me and we'll walk down the carpet, and then you always have the fans behind the railings. Right. On 2 occasions, with me there with her, all right? On 2 occasions, I've walked down these red carpets and had somebody yell out, "Anne Campia!" And they just want to talk to Anne, which is actually kind of cool. But one of my favorite, though,
I know what you're going to say.
Oh, yeah, you probably know. We were here at the AMC Burbank 16, and in the courtyard in front of the theater, there's a Panera, and we're sitting out at this Panera. Me and I think Dennis, I think you were there too, Dennis. But Dennis, John Schnepp, and we were sitting there. And John Schnepp is hard to miss in a crowd. John stands out big in a crowd. So we're sitting there eating right outside on the deck, and a couple of AMC Movie Talk fans come running up and go, "Oh my God, John Schnepp!" And they go, "Hey," and Schnepp's like, really, "Hey guys, how you doing?" And the guy's like, "Oh my God, I love your character on the show." I love that answer. But the funny thing is, though, you're right. When the guy's asking the question, when people approach us, Dennis, you might be able to speak to this too, but I find when people normally approach me, first of all, they say hi, they say I'm a fan of the show, and then they want to talk about movies. And then they want to go, "So..."
They want to play movie talk.
Yeah, they want to play movie. They want to play by yourself. So it's like, "So, do you think Star Wars will do this and this?" And like, that makes sense, because if I run into, like, I don't know, Mike and Mike from ESPN Radio, I'm going to want to ask them a sports question.
Right.
If I run into Leo Laporte, for those of you who listen to tech podcasts, if I run into Leo Laporte, I'm going to say, "So what do you think of the new Nexus phone?" or something like that.
Right.
So it makes sense. But yes, it does happen a lot, and it's happening more often. And I'm always, number one, bewildered why anybody wants to talk to me. But number two, it's always fun. It's fun, and it's an honor, and I have a lot of fun. Have you had an experience like that yet?
I have not. I'm waiting for the day. But what would you say?
You know what it is? You're intimidating.
I'm not intimidating.
You're a pretty girl, so
No,
that's intimidating to guys.
I think people have told me that I look a lot shorter on camera, which makes
because
I look shorter on camera.
Because you're tall, you tower over men. That's another reason why people are intimidated by you.
Chunkosaurus. But what is the question that you get asked the most? People come up to you asking.
Oh, okay. So there are 2 questions that I usually get asked most. One is usually about Star Wars. It's something Star Wars related. Mm-hmm. The other, because of my position on it, the other is Robin. People want to ask me about Robin because of my position that I'm a huge Robin fan from the comic books. Big fan of Robin, especially Dick Grayson, right? Who becomes Nightwing. But I do not think that storyline works in a live action movie with the new type of Batman that we have. I don't think it works. So I love Robin. I love him in the comics, but I don't necessarily want him in a live action movie. And so I usually get a lot of people want to come up and talk to me and say, "No, John, big fan of the show, but got to talk to you about Robin, man." It's like, so that happens a lot, but it's always fun.
Robin hater.
Yeah. All right. What's next?
Harry Green writes, "Great show today, guys. I love that last Twitter question. Do you think that Marvel would be where it is today had they not signed RDJ to play Iron Man and Jon Favreau to direct?"
Well, yeah, I mean, really, the film that kicked it all off for Marvel was that first Iron Man and the huge success that it was. And, I don't even think Marvel anticipated how much buzz was going to come out of Comic-Con that first Comic-Con when they first dropped the first trailer for Iron Man. And the internet blew up. The Comic-Con audience went crazy. It all went viral. And it kind of became took on a life of its own. Would there still have been a Marvel Cinematic Universe? Yes. As long as we're not talking about bombing. Like, if Iron Man 1 wasn't as huge of a success, but still successful and still good, yes, they clearly had a plan for a Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mean, that's why they had Nick Fury come in at the end in the after-credit scene. So they planned for it. They would have done it. But it's a different question if we're saying, what if the first Iron Man had bombed? Well, bombs have a tendency to change people's plans.
Right.
So maybe. But, you know, and I often have this discussion with other people too. As great as Robert Downey Jr. is as Tony Stark, and he's awesome in it, and I've loved watching him as Tony Stark, and I'm really excited that we get to see him as Tony Stark more. But a lot of times, us as movie audiences, we are very, very short-sighted to what we've actually experienced. And we don't think outside of that quite often. And like, you know, Robert Downey Jr. was great. But what if Robert Downey Jr. never took the role? And let's say for argument's sake, okay, let's say Nathan Fillion had taken the role of Iron Man. And Nathan Fillion crushed it. But maybe not quite as good as Robert Downey Jr. has, right? All anybody would say is how Nathan Fillion is perfect for Iron Man. He's the perfect guy. Nobody could ever be Iron Man as good as him. But little do we know that had this guy, Robert Downey Jr., actually gotten the role, he would have actually been a little bit better. And that's why I try to tell people now about stuff like this is like, well, I mean, if Robert Downey Jr. didn't do it, it never would have been good. Maybe there was another guy out there who, if he had gotten it, would have been even better, that we would have been saying, oh, only this guy can be that. So I never think for a lot of these movies there is only one person to play that role. I think you have multiple people that could all do it well as long as you get one of those people to play it well. You know, not anybody could play the role, but I always believe there's a certain number of actors out there who could have played Iron Man and played it great, maybe a little bit, you know, less good than Robert Downey Jr. did. Maybe one or two of them might have even been a little bit better. We'll never know. But the key is just getting somebody good for the role, solid for the role. And we got lucky that they got Robert Downey Jr.
So besides Robert Downey Jr., would Nathan Fillion have been your number one choice? If you had to choose.
Oh my gosh. Well, Nathan Fillion for me, if I had to drop him, like going back a couple years, if I had to drop Nathan Fillion, I talked about this on Movie Talk a few days ago, actually. If I had to drop him in any comic book character role, it would be Green Lantern. I just think he would have been the guy. And it has nothing to do with the fact that he voiced, did he voice Green Lantern? I know he was he did. He did voice it in the, Dennis confirmed that. And I thought that has nothing to do with that. I actually think he would have been a pretty darn good Green Lantern. But so who would I have thought about to play Tony Stark? The one guy that comes to mind quite often, because I don't think we've ever seen him in a role that's like this, but I think he's got the chops that he could have done it great. And help me out, Dennis, the comedian in The Watchmen. And he was in Supernatural. He's the Winchester's father in Supernatural. And he's in...
Fact checker
Ray. Look it up. He's the comedian in Watchmen. He is the lead guy in that Chris Evans movie, The Losers. He's in... he's the Winchester's dad.
Eddie Blake?
Nope.
And he looks like Javier Bardem.
And he looks like Javier Bardem too. Why is his name eluding me? Jeffrey Dean Morgan. Thank you very much. Jeffrey Dean Morgan is the guy I could have seen playing Iron Man. I really do. I think he's 1 or 2 years older than Robert Downey Jr. He might even be 1 or 2 years younger. I'm not sure, but he's a guy I would have gone with. But trust me, the universe worked out the way it should, and we're all very lucky to have Robert Downey Jr.
Very happy.
All right, what's next?
Gordon Evans writes, sometime after the announcement that there was going to be a sequel to Ted, it was either suggested or announced that there was going to be a reboot or a sequel to Flash Gordon. Has there been anything going on with that, or has that idea fizzled?
I believe it's Fox Studios picked up the ball in Flash Gordon, and it was back in April that they said they were going to do a Flash Gordon. And they even got a couple of writers on to start developing it. And they got the writing team behind the upcoming Star Trek 3, J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay. So they're on board to write the script. The last I heard, they didn't have a director on board yet, but Fox is producing it. So that was in April. Hasn't really been that much time since they only first got those guys on board to start developing it. And I'm sure they're going to go through several drafts and come up with really what they want to do. So as far as my understanding goes, yes, a Flash Gordon movie is still coming. but I don't think there's been any kind of official announcement beyond the fact that they hired writers, they're developing it. Still haven't heard about directors, actors, all that kind of thing, but that give them time for that.
So how popular does a movie have to generally be to have a reboot? Because it was popular, but I don't see anyone dying for a Flash Gordon remake.
I'm going to be honest with you. This is going to make me really unpopular.
Uh-oh.
I'm not dying for a Flash Gordon remake either. I know Schnepp will kill me for saying that. Schnepp is really wanting a Flash Gordon remake. But I will say this. Flash Gordon is the type of story and property that told today, you could make something pretty cool. So I'd be looking forward to it in terms of it's a movie that's got some really cool potential, rather than looking forward to it because I want a remake of that original. I don't have. Yeah, it's so good, and trust me, I don't care if the studio denies it later. It is Ted that gave life to a Flash Gordon remake. 100%. All right, what's next?
Davian Clark writes, my question follows up on a point that has been brought up several times on your show concerning adaptations. I understand the argument you made in the past that first and foremost, companies want to make the best movie and not necessarily the most faithful adaptation. My question is whether you believe there is any ethical responsibility on the studio's part to at least impart the gist of what the source material was trying to convey.
Great question. We get this form of question every once in a while. Like, do I believe there's an ethical responsibility for a studio? Let's say a studio is going to make a movie based on, let's say Watchmen. They're going to make one, and they already did. Let's say they hadn't yet. Is there an ethical responsibility to stick as close as you can to the source material, to at least get the gist of what they're trying to convey? I'm going to be unpopular. I'm going to say no. I do not believe they have an ethical responsibility to do that. You know why? Because compared to the wider movie-going audience, nobody's read the original source material. Comparatively, right? The studio's prime and only responsibility is to make the best movie they can. That being said, I have also said in the past, and I do believe this, just get the gist of it. And I think that's the word he used in the question too. Just capture the basic essence of what it is. Look, the movie X-Men Days of Future Past takes a lot of liberties with the comic book story of the Days of Future Past, right? But they get the basic, they take the core concepts and bring it to life. We don't have, sticking with the X-Men universe, we don't have Wolverine running around in stupid looking yellow spandex, right? But they capture the essence of who this person Wolverine is, right? And then they make it their own rendition to work well with the movies. One example though that I can really think of that they completely blew it, and Captain America Winter Soldier, big departure from the Winter Soldier storyline in the thing, but they made an awesome movie and that's all that counts. But the one thing that always really stands out to me as a travesty of completely abandoning the source material and suffering for it was Catwoman with Halle Berry.
Okay.
They took the core essence of what Catwoman was and they scratched it and tore it to pieces and threw it away. Like everything about it, okay? For those of you who never read any comic books and you only saw the Halle Berry Catwoman does not have the ancient mystic powers of the old Egyptians, all right? There is no supernatural connection and whatever and blah. She's not this. No, that was not Selena Kyle. I mean, that was nothing to do with Catwoman at all, aside from the fact that she was a woman in tight black leather. That's it. That's where the similarities start and end. Everything else about that movie was a total departure in every conceivable way. And I am so forgiving when it comes to, taking liberties with the source material to make the best movie possible. I'm the most forgiving guy about that in the world. But even I, like with Catwoman, it was just, and the result was when you take all the core essential elements of who character is and just completely trash it all, was one of the, without hyperbole, Catwoman is one of the worst cinematic experiences in the history of Hollywood.
So sad.
It's so bad.
Because it had such a potential. I mean, Catwoman, iconic character.
With Halle Berry, who was coming off, who had just won an Oscar for Best Lead Actress. And she might still be the only actor or actress with the distinction of winning the Oscar for Best Actress one year and then the Razzie for Worst Actress the following year.
Oh, wow.
I believe she's the only one. But here's how classy Halle Berry is. When Halle Berry won the Razzie Award for Worst Actress. She actually went to the Razzie ceremony, got up, accepted it, gave this really funny speech about it. And at that point, I mean, I was already a fan of Halle Berry because she's just so dynamitely talented. But I just personally became a big fan of hers when she did that. It's like, that shows a lot of guts. I thought
do
that
the
was
same
great.
if I was Halle Berry.
Sure, I guess so.
This is kind of veering from the question a tiny bit, but I've always wondered how true to the source material, how true does the story have to be for them to title, you know, like that when you're about to watch a movie and they say based on true events. How true does it have to be to the actual story for them to be able to put that up?
All they have to do is own the rights.
That's crazy.
Because let's look at one of a recent movie, World War Z, right? People who have read World War Z, which I have not, but people have explained to me the gist of World War Z. The movie we got, World War Z, other than the fact that there are zombies, is really not much like the book at all. Now, I don't know. I mean, it's infamous for this. We all know that World War Z went through a lot of remakes. They completely scrapped like the third act of the film, reshot it, took out entire characters. It was a huge mess. But it ended up being a pretty darn good movie, I think. But it is not at all like the book World War Z. But they own the rights to it. They could title whatever they want. They could have taken World War Z and they could have called it Superman. I mean, if it was Warner Brothers, I can't remember which studio made World War Z, but if it was Warner Brothers, if they wanted to, in their infinite wisdom, they could have slapped Superman on the title and that's it, and just left everybody confused. But as far as like a prerequisite, there are no rules. If you own the rights to it, you can make a movie and just slap the title on.
Wow, that's crazy.
All right, what's next?
Wes Weir writes, hello, AMC crew, huge fan, and I really appreciate the authenticity of the show and the hard work you do. John has said he also has a passion for sports along with cinema. Well, what are some of your top favorite sports films? Mine has to be Remember the Titans, Warrior, and Moneyball. Thanks and keep up the great work.
Solid choices there, Wes. None of those are my personal list, but those are all really solid films. You're right. I honestly, if I wasn't doing movie punditry and stuff like that, I think I would go and try to get into sports radio. I really do. I think I would. I'm a huge sports fan. I mean, hockey is life.
Go Lakers.
I'm a big fan of hockey, big fan of football, obviously, huge fan of mixed martial arts. A lot of people ask me and Dennis to do a post show for MMA stuff.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
That would be kind of funny. We've thought about it before. For me, my favorite sports movies of all time, and I didn't put a whole ton of thought into this, so somebody may mention one or two that I might go, oh yeah, I should have put that one on. One of them, Rocky IV, with Ivan Drago. I mean, that I would break you. I mean, that's just a great movie. I mean, he kills Apollo Creed, and then he's for whatever reason, the best place to train is running through 5 feet of snow in the Russian mountains, and then he turns all of the Russian people chanting Rocky at the end because of his heart. I mean, come on, that movie's awesome. So Rocky IV is definitely one for me. Another one is, and this is kind of corny and cheesy, some people might even argue it doesn't classify as a sports movie per se, but it focuses around Taekwondo, the sport of Taekwondo, and that is the Eric Roberts, James Earl Jones masterpiece, Best of the Best. That was one of the, I kid you not, Best of the Best. I'm being dead serious, everybody. Best of the Best is the first movie I can remember crying in. It is the one. At the end, those of you who have seen Best of the Best, you know what I'm talking about. At the end, after the North Koreans beat the American team, and through one reason, there's a whole bunch of things that go around that because Tommy, kind of refused to kill Daehan. He refused to kill him, and that was the only way they were going to win is if he killed him. He's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And so the Koreans win, right? So there's this big ceremony where they're putting the gold medals on the Koreans, and Daehan, who's beaten and broken, is like, he's the mighty warrior, right? He killed Tommy's brother, by the way, in combat. He killed Tommy's brother earlier in his career, accidentally, but in competition. So Daehan, with his gold medal around his neck, he limps and drags and walks across to Tommy, who's standing there with his silver medal, his head hung low, and Daehan goes, basically says, I really regret the death of your brother. I offer myself to you as your new brother. And he takes the gold medal off and he puts it on Tommy. And if you're a man, you cry. If you're not crying at that scene, you're not a man. It's like one of the most awesome scenes. I'm getting goosebumps.
I can literally see the joy in your face.
Oh my God, it's such a great scene when Dayan says, I offer myself. I'm getting choked up. I offer myself to you as your new brother. That is like awesome. So, Best of the Best.
I'm definitely gonna have to check it out.
Best of the Best 2, not so good, whatever, but the original Best of the Best is so awesome. And then I think my favorite sports movie of all time is actually a Russell Crowe movie, that a lot of people have not seen. And it's breathtakingly brilliant. It's called Mystery Alaska. And what it is about this little town in Alaska that their whole life revolves around playing hockey. Mm-hmm. I mean, they do their day in, day out stuff, but then the whole community comes together and they play hockey. And they're so good at it. This is the thing of the basis of the movie. They're so good at it that the NHL thinks it might be a fun promotional thing that during the All-Star break, let's send the New York Rangers to that little community to play their hockey team. And so it's all about this little community realize they're going to be on the map and people are going to see them. And it's just like, it's a justification for their way of life. And Russell Crowe stars in it and he's awesome in it. And Mike Myers, for those of you who are Canadian, you'll understand the reference, but Mike Myers does his version of a Don Cherry character. I know a lot of Americans don't know who Don Cherry is, but if you're Canadian, you know who I'm talking about, the Right Reverend Don Cherry. And Mike Myers says this is great Don Cherry in it, and but it's a beautiful, special movie. And so yeah, those would be my three. Do you have a sports movie that you really love?
I feel like I notice a lot. Or, I mean, you just named three that aren't soccer movies, but I feel like soccer is such a prominent movie.
Oh, yeah. Especially worldwide.
Yeah. Why is that? Do you think that certain sports translate better through film rather than others?
Well, the thing about soccer, one of the beautiful things about sport is that it connects with us on a lot of different levels. A sport is the ultimate reality TV. Mm-hmm. I mean, and we all connect with it. Like, I played hockey as a kid, so when I watch movies about hockey, it's inspiring. A lot of people play football. And so when they see a movie about football, not only they're seeing the narrative and the great story, but they're probably connecting to it as well because they have an association with that. And hands down, worldwide, the most popular sport in the world, contrary to a lot of our beliefs, is not NFL, it's soccer. So hands down. Kids all over the world grow up kicking those balls around, playing, what is it called? The what game? The not the perfect game. It's called, the elegant game, the special game, the beautiful game is what it's called. They call it playing the beautiful game. And, so they grow up. And so when you get these movies that come out that are based around soccer, there's a lot of people on the planet, maybe not so much in North America, but around the world that they attach to that. It's a very special and powerful thing to them. So I think that's why soccer has that kind of appeal.
Yeah, that makes sense.
All right, what's next?
James Walsh writes, hello AMC, and thank you for taking my question. Having recently watched John Wick and enjoying it immensely, I was wondering if you think there ever will be a sequel to it, because I would love to see more.
I think John Wick, we've talked a lot about John Wick over the past few weeks, and it's worth talking about. It's a very special movie. I love this movie. I thought it was terrific. I was so entertained by it. The great action sequence. It's a movie that understands what it is. It's not trying to be a great narrative. It's not trying to be a great heavy drama. It understands we are a rock'em sock'em, grrr, I'm a man kind of action film, and they do it great. And it's a lot of fun. So, and Dennis and I reviewed it and we both really enjoyed it. And it made more money than they thought. Now, it didn't make a lot of money, but it made more money than they thought it was going to. I believe you could do, and I've said this before, you could do an entire spin-off movie based on the Continental, the hotel, where the hotel for hitmen, It's an amazing, I think there's so much great story that you could tell there. It'll all depend on if Keanu Reeves wants to do another one. I think if Keanu Reeves says, yep, I'm up to doing John Wick 2, I think they're going to make a John Wick 2. Because this was not an expensive movie to make. It made the money. It was profitable, had great appeal, only dropped 44% from its week 1 to week 2, which is very respectable. So I'm going to guess it all depends on what kind of offers Keanu Reeves starts to get now that he's kind of back on the map because of John Wick. If he lands 2 or 3 big franchises, then we probably won't see John Wick 2. But if he just gets a couple of one-shot movies offered to him and he's got to get some good things going, I could see him coming back to it.
Right. when do you think is the perfect time to decide on a sequel? Because some movies even announce a sequel before the first ones even come out, which has never made sense to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, studios have a very intricate system of tracking and figuring out, okay, what is the buzz like? How are people talking about this? And they come up with these estimates of what they think is going to make opening weekend. And based on opening weekend numbers, you go, okay, we got to make another one of these. For smaller movies like John Wick, I think you wait till it's done its run.
Okay.
I think you let it do its full run, see how much it continues to drop. If more word of mouth, keeps bringing in some money. And then you see what the final number is. And you think, can we repeat that number? Can we put a little bit more money into a sequel and still at least get that number or a little bit more return? And if the answer is yes, then you go ahead and you make a sequel.
Makes sense.
Yeah. All right, what's next?
Mitch Stevens writes, "Hey AMC crew, I wanted to get your thoughts on the Marvel versus DC fanboy wars that have been raging on across the internet as of late. I personally find it ridiculous. Us comic book fans should be pushing the genre forward by making it about bad films versus good films rather than making it about Marvel versus DC. Thanks and keep up the great work." No?
Whenever, like, me and Schnepp or Dennis or Christian or we talk about this topic, it's just head shaking. Look, I am clearly, I am a massive fan of comic book movies. Love comic book movies. But what you also have out there are these comic book movie fans who, being a comic book movie fan is not good enough for them. They have to be a Marvel fan or a DC fan. They have to be one or the other for some reason. They get in their heads that they can only pick one and be on one side, which I think is ludicrous. I think it's absolutely ludicrous. It's fine to have a preference for one. Like, oh, I prefer the Marvel movies or I prefer the DC movies. That's all cool. But you see in our chat boards too, these religious zealots who are like, only Marvel movies are great and anything with DC on it sucks, or vice versa. Right. DC fans, all Marvel movies are for children, adults want DC, or whatever. It's this crazy dogma that these guys have. That's like, you do realize, I've had a conversation with them recently. I said, did you realize, right? Because they're trying to pull me into this argument, and I refuse to be pulled into it. It's like, okay, you DC boy and you Marvel boy, you go ahead and blindly serve your corporate masters, these corporations that you have nothing to do with, but apparently you've given your free will to, and they are now have all power over you to serve them and whatever. You go ahead and have your blind corporate masters. I'm just going to sit back and enjoy comic book movies.
So you don't have a preference?
Honestly, right now, I think at one point, I preferred the Marvel films, but this is the point where the previous two DC movies I had seen was The Dark Knight Rises, which I did not love, and Green Lantern, which while I don't think the Green Lantern was as horrible as most people think it still was not good, and it was a disappointment. So I was in a place where the two most recent DC films were those two films, and my most recent Marvel films were a whole slew of Marvel movies that I really liked. So there was a time where I kind of preferred Marvel. But then Man of Steel comes out in a year where there were 4 major comic book movies that came out last year. And 3 of them were Marvel character-based. 1 of them was a DC character-based, Man of Steel. And I loved. I don't care what anybody else says. I am completely, unabashedly in love with Man of Steel. I think that movie is great. Not good, great. I think it's awesome. And that pulled me back to having more of a centrist views that I honestly don't have a preference. I thought the casting of Ben Affleck I was the only guy online saying that this is genius when everybody else was jumping up and down and jumping on that bandwagon of Ben Affleck sucks. I was the one guy to go, this is genius. This is a great move on their part. So I was really excited about that. I'm super stoked about Batman versus Superman, all that kind of stuff. But this small percentage of people who are the religious zealots that either we serve unquestionably to our Marvel corporate masters, or we serve unquestionably to our DC corporate masters. It is only one or the other. Keep trying to drag me into this fight. And I remember when we did this announcement, Marvel did this big event a couple of weeks ago where they announced their next slate for the next 5 years. They announced cast. They brought out Robert Downey Jr. They brought out Chris Evans. They brought out John Boyega, Chadwick Boseman. They brought him out. Kevin Feige got on stage. His big president. They showed us graphics and they showed us clips of upcoming Avengers, and they gave us all this big thing. It was literally the 7 or 8 biggest movie news stories of the day. So we said for AMC Movie Talk, which every day we cover the biggest movie news stories, whatever they are. The biggest movie news stories today are all Marvel.
Right.
We can't possibly get through this in a half hour. This is a special event. We're going to give it an hour. So as soon as we did that, we had so many people crying, "You didn't give DC an hour." First of all, like, why don't you show respect to DC? You better do a DC hour tomorrow. It's like, okay, just wait a minute, Fido, okay? First of all, we gave a lot of time to DC, and we explained that, they dropped it the last second before a show. We couldn't organize anything, so we dedicated 15 minutes. But DC's announcement was only at a corporate function where Kevin Tsujihara, who I think is genius, and I think he's going to guide Warner Brothers and DC in great new directions. But it was him letting a bunch of shareholders know. There was no graphics, there was no celebrities, there was no insight about what the stories are going to be, there was no insight about the casting, there was no insight about anything. There wasn't as much to talk about. So inevitably, a lot of people who are the DC religious zealots started crying at me saying, you're a Marvel fanboy. And it's like, okay, you do realize that we did a 40-minute special episode just on the Ben Affleck casting, right? Like, we did an hour for the 9 or 10 huge announcements Marvel did. But you do remember we did an entire 40-minute episode just on the Ben Affleck casting, right? If you go and look at the thumbnails at our YouTube channel for AMC Mailbag, there was a 5-week stretch where it was all led off by DC stories. It's like, so don't come crying to me that, oh, you don't give as much attention to DC as you do to Marvel. Yes, we do. Shut up. We really do. But I don't care. If more Marvel news comes out, we're going to cover Marvel.
Right.
And we're not then going to even it out with DC if DC doesn't have new stuff worth talking about coming out. And if DC puts out the most news that week, we're going to talk about the DC stuff. And if either of them don't have one of the 7 biggest movie news stories, like we did like this week, there was nothing. There was no stories about comic book movie news. Then we're not going to talk about it at all. So, yeah, I'm not going to be dragged into this religious argument of Marvel and DC. I am just one of the majority that I just like comic book movies. I don't care if Marvel gives it to me. I don't care if Fox gives it to me. I don't care if DC gives it to me. I don't care if, Sony gives it to me. I don't care if Universal starts developing them. I don't care who it comes from. I just want to see good movies, and that's all that matters to me.
I know there's so many layers to this, but I just don't get, well, maybe right now there's so much buzz over comic movies. Do you think that at some point Marvel and DC could, I know there's so many layers to it, but could ever come together to make a movie together? Ever?
Never say never.
Right.
I mean, they've had crossovers in the comic books. Never say never. Not in the next 10 to 15 years. But never say never. Who knows? Lots of things can happen.
Okay.
All right, what's next? We have last question of the day?
I think so, yes.
All right, last question of the day.
XL Fernandez writes, where is Bryan Cranston and why is he not an A-list actor fulfilling any key roles lately?
I remember I've had several debates with people, including people on our own staff, about what will happen with Bryan Cranston once Breaking Bad is done. And a lot of people would try to say to me, he is instantly going to be headlining huge movies all day long. And I said, I don't know, because I think a lot of people are going to... First of all, Bryan is incredibly gifted. He's an amazing, talented actor. I love seeing him in movies. Even in, like, what was that remake of the Schwarzenegger movie? Total Recall. I thought he was great in Total Recall as the bad guy. I thought he was really good. He was really good in the small part that he had in Godzilla. But it's the curse of a successful TV star who becomes famous because they were a TV star first. It's a difficult transition for them to get them into roles outside. Now, Bryan is also, I don't know how old Bryan is, but he's older, right? So that kind of limits the types of movies that he could be the head lead guy. I mean, drop him in Argo in supporting role and he'll steal the show. Right. But there's not a lot of opportunity for a guy who is primarily known as a television star, who, even though he's one of the world's most gifted actors, at the age that he's at, a lot of big movies that are high profile that would have roles that are right for him in leading roles. Although he does have this one movie coming out called Trumbo, based on Dalton Trumbo, the acclaimed screenwriter from the 1940s. It's an incredible story because he got blacklisted because the U.S. government branded him as a communist. And back in this, so it's a study about this incredibly dark, weird era that the United States went through. And then this one brilliant guy, and him playing the lead, a Trumbo. I look, I don't know anything about the film other than the basic story. I haven't seen the script. Obviously, there's no trailers for it. I haven't seen any stills for it. But this is the type of movie where if they do it right and Bryan Cranston is as brilliant as he's capable of, we could see Bryan Cranston's name in Oscar conversations for this movie, Trumbo. So keep your eyes and ears open for this movie called Trumbo.
So do you think it's the type of movie that could help a TV star break into the movie world, or how good their performance is?
Man, it's such a sticky question because we've seen literally, I could probably sit down if I tried really hard and list off 20. Maybe 20 actors who became big and famous on TV first, who then made a successful transition into a successful movie career. Maybe 20 out of the past 30, 40 years. Out of the 400 that have tried it. It's a difficult proposition. There's not a lot of Michael J. Foxes, who can pull that off. There's not a lot of George Clooney's who can pull that off. There's not a lot of, some people, Will Smith doesn't actually qualify because he was famous even before television because of his music career. But there's a list of actors who have done it, 20, 21, 22 of them maybe that are legit. It's hard. It's really hard. So I don't know what the magic bullet is. I don't know if it's about the performance or the right role, because it hasn't happened successfully enough yet for us to sit back and see the pattern and see where it's come from, So it's a tough one. But let's just keep our fingers crossed for Bryan Cranston, because if anybody in this damn business deserves huge A-list status, it's Bryan Cranston. He's amazing. All right, folks. Well, that'll do it for this installment of AMC Mailbag. Thanks so much for joining us. Don't forget, if you want your comment or question on AMC Mailbag, email us at amcmovietalk@gmail.com. Maybe you'll see it on Mailbag. Maybe you'll see it on Movie Talk. Cross your fingers. Let's see if we can get it on here. I want to remind you, too, that lots of great movies are playing in AMC theaters this weekend. Head on over to www.amctheaters.com for your theater, showtime, and, of course, your movie ticket information. If you want an audio-only version of this episode, look in the description of the video, and you'll find a link to our podcast feed so you can listen to us on the way to work or at the gym, wherever you are. And I want to thank our lovely host today, Miss Ashley Mova. Ashley, where can people find you online?
Oh, wow. Twitter, Instagram, at Ashley Mova. I want to do a shoulder shake, but I'm not going to do it.
It's instinctual now, isn't it?
It totally is.
And you guys can find me on the various social media networks at John Campea. So that'll do it for us for AMC Mailbag. Thanks a lot for joining us, guys. And until next time, bye-bye.